Hi, I'm Linda Deir, the author of Guided. Her spirit guide angels were her best friends and life coaches. Guided is my true life story and winner of the 2017 International Body, Mind, Spirit Book Award. Ever since I was 2 years old, I've seen, communicated with, and even photographed my spirit guide angels. In Guided, I use my own life as a template to teach you what I learned from these loving, intelligent spirits. Most importantly, I show you how to make the connection to your own spirit guides and angels so you can live a guided life. A life free of fear and doubt. The life you intended to live before you got here. In my guided journey, part 2, page 12, I will talk about compromise, when a quiet desperation took over. I will take you back to the time in your pre-teens when you felt your life was dominated with compromise. That's when a quiet desperation took over. For the first time in your life, you felt something was missing, that you weren't good enough. This was when the struggle began. Your life became hard and competitive. You took everything personally. We watched you get lost. So let's get started. Most or all of your friends only came around when they wanted something from you. They were self-serving and didn't make you feel appreciated. Everyone was competitive with little time to be a real friend. In fact, just when you thought you could trust a friend, they turned on you. At this point in your life, you were seasoned in the area of friendships. You started out with the best friends, and ever since that time we had together, you have been expecting friendships to be that easy. This is the core reason you were so disappointed with friendships here in this world. Something has always been missing. But where did you acquire this comparison? Well, that's how you know for sure what actually happened. You missed the world you came from, the part of you you thought you had to leave behind. Upon realizing this for yourself at that time in your life, you will begin to realize the first compromises you made. It's not something that anyone noticed because everyone was doing it. Looking back, you can see they all drank the same Kool-Aid of follow the leader like you did. When you look back and see it for what it was, and not what you made it into, you will remember the real feeling that rushed through you when you still knew the difference and the truth. It's in this realization that you will see where you started to compromise your integrity, as well as lowering your personal standards by mindlessly going along with the crowd. You felt disconnected from everything now. You let it go long ago and have been searching for it ever since. This longing for what's been missing in your life wears you down. Even if you are fortunate enough to be a natural athlete, performer, speaker, writer, artist, or musician, in this world you still felt that void. In fact, many times these same people, in their desperate attempt to feel what's missing in their lives, became great talents from the darkness they bring into their lives so they can share their brilliance with us. Seeing this compounding effect of all your previous decisions that you unwittingly made, it's time to reflect on these life-changing decisions that happened long before you were equipped to. Using this renewed awareness, review what you wrote in part 2, pages 1 through 8 of My Guided Journey. In fact, because of this awareness, you may find yourself rewriting some of it because you are remembering more. Okay, Ray.
Hi.
Ray's always with us, and he fires off some questions to me about what he thinks would be appealing or interesting and helpful when you start writing in the journal for page 12. We're on page 12, compromise. And so you can begin to actually write out what happened at that time in your life with clarity, without taking it personally, the way it happened, instead of emotionally and coming from a place of being a victim. So that's what he's going to cover with me right now.
Well, I just made some observations there while you were talking about people shouldn't beat themselves up at this point in their life. When they look back at their preteens or their junior high and their high school years, they shouldn't beat themselves up because they unwittingly or unwillingly made some decisions about friends that were forced upon them by society. They made a lot of decisions, even more so than friends, about everything.
Right.
And
right.
that were, society kind of forced their thinking on them, so they can't go back. The only thing they're really guilty of, I guess I'm saying, is that their decisions were made outside of themselves or without all of the right thinking about all of the consequences.
Or the right information.
Right information and the
Right.
consequences involved. I mean, you don't think when you're 12, 13 years old that, well, about the decisions I'm going to make this today, or how am I going to feel about them when I'm 50?
Or how are these same decisions going to snowball, affecting my life and every decision I make from that point forward? That's the whole point to this. Until you go back and you start to unearth that what those decisions you made that you were unprepared to make, you didn't have the information to make them, yet when you were forced to make them and you made them, you didn't realize how powerful they were. They may have made you feel depressed to make that decision. They may have made you feel really smart, which could be even scarier. Because now you're even sold on the decision you made, which is super flawed, all right? So anyway, that could be even worse when you felt really good about it.
Yeah, I'm sure you really didn't give it a lot of thought one way or another. You just made a decision at that point based upon
Right.
pressures.
Based on the information you had.
Right. Didn't consider the consequences. Okay. So let's go back to that time with your friends. Was the compromising one-sided? By that I mean, did your friends, when they came to you with something, did they have to compromise to be with you or not? Did you have to compromise to be with them?
So what's the point in asking that question?
Is it a two-way street? Here's the group, the clique that you wanted to belong to in the school, the cool kids, all right? And you compromised to join that group. There's a leader in the group.
Mm-hmm. So did they have to lower their standards to let you in?
Right, there's some leader who's the coolest.
Okay, well, supposedly, right?
Right.
They're just the biggest manipulator, and just like any leader, they're the most charismatic, they're the most convincing, they're the prettiest one, whatever it happens to be. They have some currency that's strong in that particular environment, in the school environment. At that time, in history, in the way things work, but they I mean, it's almost like they give you an ultimatum, like you have to perform in a certain way, and if you don't, you're going to get kicked out of that group. So you've got to do things. You've got to, in sorority clubs, they make you do pretty disgusting things.
That leads to the hazing in college.
Right. It's a precursor to all the things that are still coming, based on being swayed, being manipulated into going and lowering your standards to be in that group. All right. And so for those of you who didn't compromise yourself, you just didn't care what they thought about you, and they may have made fun of you, and I'm sure they did, if you didn't lower your standards to be with them. But in the eyes of all the kids, you would raise your standards if you were in that group. So it's confusing, and the more that you lean into that and let that be what guides you, that confusion, that compromise, then the more you do that, the more you're likely to continue to do that as you get another year older, another 5 years older. You get married, you have kids, and you just feel the pressure of society pressing down on you, and you continue to fall into that compliance, okay, and that compromise. It does catch up to us if we fall into that. It's a lot more damaging to fall into compromise than it is not to. But here's the price. When you don't let yourself fall into compromise, the price you pay for not doing that happens now, right now, in the present moment. And you guys, that's all you really have, is the present moment. If you fall into compromise, you just kick the can down the road, and as it builds and it builds, and there's more compromise and more people that expect you to compromise, the boss, the relationship, the kids, society, everybody, and the relatives, everybody, the friends. You built your whole life on them expecting you to compromise. Then for you to make a shift and a change, you have to make some pretty big changes. You're going to disappoint some people, quite a few people, because they're expecting you to be like that. But the sooner you act on this not compromising and being true to yourself, that's the whole point. When you're not compromising, you're being true to yourself. And so the payoff down the road is just more of being true to yourself as opposed to being more compromised. That's the difference. That's what it leads to.
So do you think that as you get older, that it gets easier to compromise?
Well, what are you talking about?
Because you're more seasoned. Okay, let's go back to...
Are you talking about a person who compromises now?
Right.
Or are you talking about a person who's true to themselves now? They're different people,
Well,
right?
let's start with the person who learned how to compromise when they were, say, 3 or 4 or 5 years old. You didn't come in here in a compromising position. You
Right.
came in here powerful, intelligent, had all the gifts that you needed.
Who you are, true
Right.
to yourself,
Right.
over here. And then compromise happened over here when you started negotiating and you started compromising and you started trying to fit in to this world, okay? And when you do compromise, I have to tell you this, when you compromise and you start leaning into this and start doing this, you'll remember when you started doing that in the early parts of part 2, page 1 through 8. That's why I said, go back and review those pages. Because over here, when you've compromised, you pushed more of your real self away. Because you see, you can't, if you had your real self and you maintained that and you continued to have your real self while you're in this world and you were working together and you were in one piece, you couldn't have compromised. Because your real self is real. It doesn't compromise. It's true to itself. It knows about the moment, living in the moment, being true to itself. Its urge is to be what it is, okay? It can't breathe in this compromise. So that to the degree that you've compromised, you've pushed that real self away. So if you feel overweighted in compromise, then it just means that you have pushed your real self farther away, and now you need to concentrate more on bringing that back. And this will start to balance itself out. But you won't know what that is until you write down what happened at that time in your life, page 12 of part 2, compromise. And through the other pages, 1 all the way up through 11, you're going to see how you were heading in that direction. You get to that part where you compromise, and it's so painful. So it's such a solitary place to find yourself in that compromise, because you know that you feel it. You know it's missing. Something is desperately missing.
Okay. Now, this is kind of a compound question here. So looking back, the way I understand it is the compromise starts around age 3. Because from 0 to 2...
2 or 3. You start to remember...
Somewhere in there.
It's what I think what Ray's referring back to, you guys, part 2, page 1 is fear. And the first time you feel somebody do something to you that makes you feel fearful, it shocks you, it surprises you. Your real self is fully activated, and it hits you like this, and it catches you off guard. You're really not here yet. You're here, but you're not taking this world too seriously. You're really, really connected to this, okay, to where you came from. So, go ahead, Ray.
So when you're a baby,
right,
you haven't compromised on anything because you don't think things through.
Right. You're not coming from reasoning.
You come from experience.
You come from knowing.
Knowing and experience. I mean, you see something on the other side of the room, you crawl over there your curiosity draws you to it.
Well, for lack of experience, because you are a baby, it's knowing and it's feeling. Okay? So those are the two things working for you before you start to really integrate in this world.
Okay, so when you say integrate, that's too soft of a word, I think. I think you are irritated rather than integrated. You're irritated by the fact that somebody, your parents, adults, want to tell you now what you can do and what you can't do.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're 3 years old and they say, don't do that, what do you think?
Well, I understand.
I want to do that.
Right. Right.
So they're introducing compromise around the age of 3 or 4 when you've never experienced compromise or didn't have to compromise to live your life.
Okay, now the parent, to side with the parent's just trying to raise the kid. Okay, being a parent's a tough job, and that's all they're trying to do. And to the kid, it seems like they're being controlled. Okay, controlled, and they're not used to that. They're used to being a free spirit. That's where they just came from. So it's a form of compromise because now they've got to obey. They've got to lean into what the parent is requiring of them. Okay, and so it is a form of compromise, but really it's not a bad thing. You understand? It's not a bad thing, but it's what it leads to. It's what it brings out in you. How far you go with it, okay? Even as a baby.
Now let's let people know, maybe some of them haven't read your book, haven't read Guided. It was very different for you from 0 to 2 than for most people.
Right.
Psychologists say that most adults can't remember before the age of 3 or 4 anything that happened. So they don't remember living like that when they came in here. All they remember is the start of compromise.
Right. Because it's something that you resisted.
Right.
You start out pushing it away. You start, the parent says, no, don't touch that. Don't put your hand in the fire. Don't put your hand in the door. Well, watch, don't, no. And pretty soon the kid just says, no. No, back at you. Okay, so this is their way of rebelling against the compromise.
Right.
Okay, but it's not a compromise because they have to learn in this world. But it feels like it to the child who's a free spirit that just came into this world. That's what I think Ray's leaning into here. Right. So where are you going?
How is it different for you?
You mean at that age?
At that age, right. Okay. I mean, we're talking about how old we are now. Right. Looking back at where all this compromise started that got you to where you are today.
Okay, I'm going to just speed through this. Just a quick synopsis of how I know all these things and why I talk about them and why I wrote about it in my book, Guided. This companion journal, My Guided Journey, is the companion journal to Guided, all right? And because of all the fans that have asked me, okay, I get what I love this story, and I want to learn how to do this for myself. That's what generated My Guided Journey. Yep. All right. So going back to the beginning, like Ray's asking me to do, is when I was told to do things, I did them. I mean, I knew that I was supposed to learn in this world. I knew that. But I also had a mother who was very abusive, and so I had to think differently than most kids. And I don't mean that no kids were abused. I know that it went on, and it goes on to this day. But in my particular case, my mom was really dangerous. So I had to, I got confronted with fear in such a powerful way from what my mom did to me, that in that moment, in a moment's notice, it's like being in shock. I was released from the fear in the instant that I was in so much shock that I asked for help, and they all showed up around me, and the whole thing began. This is when this all started. And this connection to my spirit guides and angels became huge, a huge thing in my life. And I could contact them, talk with them, get answers, go to sleep for a nap, and get the answers I needed whenever I needed them, and to this day. Okay, so I have a really strong connection because I learned it so young. I remember what this was like when I first came here and how I had to acclimate to this world. This was not easy for me, acclimating here. In fact, it's not a place I wanted to be, all right? Because I knew where I came from. I knew who they were. I knew who I was before I got here. And it just made being here, it made it very sobering and very difficult. So I knew how to work with where I was, but and get through all this and do what I was told. But I also had this guidance in my real friends and my real family that were guiding me through this, and still do. And so by the time I got to the point in my life where we're on Compromise, part 2, page 3 of my guided journey, preteens, I felt like a horse at the gate, at the races, where it was just getting ready to open so I could run and go. I was so anxious to get out of that family that I could hardly breathe anymore. It had built up to the point where because I didn't compromise, because I wouldn't let it go, because I wouldn't push myself away, my real self away, and just be 100% in this world and let the people in my life beat me down, because that's what it would have been in my world. The family I was in was tormented me, okay? So I couldn't really connect with it. So I kept myself alive from where I came from. And I was fully capable of understanding things, keeping my mouth shut, keeping my guidance to myself. I was so far ahead, I didn't even realize it. I didn't realize it until, we're going to get into that a little bit later in the pages, but as I got a little bit older, did I really realize it once I finally got out of that environment. So I don't know where you wanted me to go with that.
Well, I just wanted to explain how your early years were different from most people.
But I'll tell you
how that affected you and compromise.
Okay, compromise, because I wouldn't compromise. I got punished a lot. I got reprimanded at school. I was condemned basically by the teachers and the kids because of the way I was so different. And I paid a price when I was a kid. Nobody understood me, nobody got it, but I did. I understood me, and they understood me. And so I was okay with that. I was totally good with that. I was sure about who I was, okay? I wasn't stumbling around in this world. So if they wanted to throw me out of school and call me a bad kid, which I was not, and stuff like that, I had to be okay with it, you guys. And I was okay with it. The payoff came when I got out, when I was 16. And then by the time I was 19, my life just took off. It was like everything I touched turned to gold. There was nothing I couldn't do. Because you see, I was coming from this real place in me, this authentic place. I did everything because of who I was, not because of how I was threatened. If you don't do this, this will happen to you. If you don't do that, that's going to happen to you. Oh, and the price for not doing that. I didn't let any of that stuff scare me. People said I took risks and chances that were incredible. You know what? When you come from who you are, they're not risks. They're living. They're just part of the continuum. It's about just living your life the way your urge drives you to do it, okay? Your passion drives you to do it. And over here, people were filled up with fear. I would look at it and just go, again, I can't deal with it. It was the same fear they tried to impose on me and threats as a kid. In part 12, compromise, I couldn't do it. So, but I did watch the other kids do it, and I, you know, and I have a coaching business, a global coaching business, where I help people, you know, realize what happened and pull out of that by bringing themselves back.
Okay, next question. When is the pressure to compromise greatest? Is it at a certain time in your life or in certain situations?
Okay. This is what I'll say about that. When you are a child, before compromise, page 12, all right, in the earlier parts, that's why I asked you to go back to page 1 through 8 of part 2. That's when it happened. It happened from the first time you can remember, your first memory, and how you reacted, the person who came here, the new person who just got here, who now had to follow the rules, right? When that person, that it depended on how you reacted to discipline, how you reacted to following the rules and, you know, doing what you were told to do, how you were supposed to do them, okay, that kind of thing. If you just went along with it and said, oh, okay, but you didn't throw the baby out with, you didn't think you had to throw yourself away. You weren't so shocked by this world and fearful and scared about what was going on here that you just threw yourself away and didn't think about it. That's what happened to a lot of kids. And when that happened, that's when you compromised, your first compromise. You threw yourself away. You don't really throw yourself away. You pushed it away so hard because you wanted to be liked. You wanted to do it right. You wanted to not get in trouble. You wanted, you know, it was overkill. In my world, when I experienced that, I was like, oh, okay. You know, I mean, I was pretty relaxed with it. But that only happened after I had that experience at 20 months old and I met these guys, all right? And it changed everything. It woke me up. And I knew that this world, here's what shifted in me. I knew this world was not all there was when this happened at 20 months old. I knew when I saw them look at me and I saw what they saw when they saw me, and the first realization I had is, this is not all there is. I knew who I was, where I came from. I remembered them. So this world was never that real to me, all right, from then on. So it didn't have that overwhelming effect where I just was shocked and feared into living this life, all right? It had no appeal to me. So that kept me from buying into compromise. You got to go back. Part 1 through 8, you got to go back and you got to make sure that what you wrote in there, compromise will make you review that, and what you wrote in there is really what happened, all right?
Okay, so on the other hand, compromise is situational, okay? There's usually a relationship involved in what makes most people compromise is a relationship. So it's relationship oriented, and you learn throughout your life, starting as a child, that the relationships you have with everybody, if you want to have a relationship with them, you have to compromise in certain areas.
That's true.
So what happens, you allow compromise to become the basis of all relationships going forward in your life.
When do you do that?
You become good at it.
When?
When you start dating, I would say when you start dating, it really kicks into high gear. People, whether they're dating in high school, college, or now...
Can I stop you for just a minute on that?
I was on a roll, but okay.
Okay, but if I don't answer that right now, I'm going to miss it. That has everything to do with not wanting to be alone. All right. So at 20 months old when this happened, and what I'm saying to you guys is when you work through this and you realize where you got knocked off your path, all right, you will then, your real self will just start coming back. You won't even be able to stop it. It will just start coming back. You'll start feeling things that you haven't felt maybe ever, okay? that just they're bringing you back to life. You might find yourself crying a little bit more because, my God, this is huge, all right? So when you realize when this starts to happen, what you're feeling when you cry or you feel real emotional, it's not, part of it is you missed yourself, you missed who you are, and you're back now. And the other part is you realize you are not alone. And you know what? You never have been. They haven't gone anywhere. They've never left you. You've never been alone. You're never alone. And when you realize all this, it's overwhelmingly emotional. So I will say that when it first comes through, when you first feel yourself coming back to you, okay? You lighten up in this world so that can happen.
Okay, so you start to get good at it when you start dating and you push it into every relationship that you have. You never, on a first date, think of the first date situation, you never put on your real face. You put on the face that you want them to think you are. So you've compromised right there, and they're doing the same thing. And you may compromise throughout your conversation with your first conversation with them, your first impressions. So now you're in your 40s, 50s, and 60s, and you look back, you say it's in the relationships. It's all about the relationships that you've had. But you look back, and you're not as upset with the decisions you made, but all the compromise you had to put in to have those decisions.
To have those relationships.
Right. It's the compromise.
Okay, so what it is, it's a sellout. I think I'm going to get right to what it is. What you did is you sold out because you wanted that relationship so bad because you didn't want to be alone. All right? That's what it is. When you write in your journal and you tell what happened in those parts of your life, all you're doing, you guys, is you're taking and writing it down for what it is. You're telling it like it happened. And it's coming from a place of feeling it, but not emotional. Okay? If you're telling this what happened, your story about what happened with emotions, then you're not coming from clarity, and it comes from being a victim. And in that kind of writing, you're never going to unearth what really happened there. It's not going to be clear. It's going to be like this instead of like this, and looking at it objectively. Because you're an adult now. You can look back at that situation, and you don't need to be a victim anymore. You need to get a hold of it. Because if you don't do it that way, if you're not clear and you're not telling the story and what happened from what it felt like and what you knew, okay, as opposed to emotional energy and being a victim, that's this world. The other world is just what happened. It's just what is, all right? And as the sooner you get that sober with your defining what happened, the faster you're going to come back. The quicker you're going to have this relationship.
Okay. Would you say that compromise is based in fear or comes from fear?
Does.
All the time?
It definitely does. Fear. Because fear is fear, okay? This is love and this is fear, all right? You come from love and you're taught how to be fearful. So you comply and you follow the rules and you do everything that, to the point that we take this so seriously here. I'm not saying that we're not here and we don't need to, to work in this world. I mean, we decided to come here. That's a consequence of being here. We all have to do that, but we take it too far, where we let it push us around and scare us and do all that. You got to get it under control. You've got to start breathing. I mean, I say that a lot in our other sessions we do, where you got to breathe and just really start to learn to breathe, and that will also let this come back.
So what does compromise lead to? Because people seem to be pretty good at it by the time they're in their 40s and
It leads
50s.
to a life of regrets. That's it. A life of regrets. Because when you compromise to the point of going overboard, where you let this life just be all that there is, instead of being the real you and being one with all this, when you just let compromise dominate you, like you'll remember what you did and where it started when you start writing it in here from part 2, page 1 through 8, all right? You will remember. But you got to tell it like it happened so you can define it, and then you can take and look at it. And the more you do this, the more clear you get, the quicker this will be restored.
Do you think people are more upset when they look back on their life, when they're in their midlife, okay? Do you think they're more upset with the compromises they made in their personal life or regarding their career? That maybe their personal life got in the way of that, what they really wanted to be when they grew up?
Well, I mean, that's a hard question. I think that they kind of go together. I think that if you have a career and you have a relationship, but the career is dominating your life, so you don't have much time for the relationship, right? Or you have a relationship and you don't have much of a career, so you really lean into that relationship because the career doesn't dominate your life. Now the relationship does. What happens? In other words, you guys, what happens if something happens to either one? What happens if you leaned too far into a relationship, too far into a career? You're out of balance. You're back into that. It's an insecurity. It's just an insecurity that keeps snowballing throughout your life, okay? And you get to a point where you go, you know, my life doesn't seem to have the meaning or something. Something's missing. And that's what you wind up with. You wind up with this feeling here. And what that feeling of that you're missing something, when you feel that, that's guidance. That's letting you know that this is your truth center. This is where you feel things. This is not emotional energy. This is the truth, okay? It's telling you that something is missing. And you really won't know, is it the relationship, is it the career, is it the kids, is it the whatever, okay, until you get yourself back. You got to put yourself back together again so that now, being in two worlds, you're in two worlds, you've got it together, and you can see things for what they are. You can look it right in the eye. You're not sugarcoating anything anymore. And when somebody says something to you or you hear something, you instantly know. You instantly know. Your intuition's clear. You're working. Everything's working for you, all right? And you're not out of balance with one thing or the other. If you're in a relationship that insists that you compromise, you'll sit back from the relationship and go, well, I can't do that, you know? I mean, I will lean into the relationship. I will compromise where it's healthy, all right? Like if something happens to my mate and I have to, and there's something wrong with my mate and they need help, that's not compromising. That's being a good spouse or mate or partner, okay? That's not a compromise. That's love, all right? Compromising is when they do something, let's say they do something that defrauds you. They do something that breaks the trust. And then now you have to lower your standards to stay in that relationship. That's a compromise. All right? So it's about your integrity at that point. That's the difference.
What happens when both people in a relationship compromise just to stay together?
Well, we do that. We compromise to be together. We do.
Do we?
Yes, we have compromises, right? I mean, if there's something that I need or I want, Ray goes out of his way to make sure that he can get it for me if he can, all right? And if there's something he wants or that he feels he needs, I tell him, Ray, you go ahead and you get that, if we can afford to do it. I mean, I want him to be happy, okay? So it wouldn't be something I'd want. I wouldn't spend my money on it, right? But we're in this relationship together, so I want him to be happy. And so I'll say, go ahead and do that. I want you to feel good. I want you to have that. So that's a compromise. But they're reasonable compromises. It's not like a compromise where, an unreasonable compromise.
Like an unhealthy compromise.
Right. That's when you know you've lowered, when you have an unhealthy compromise, it's when you've lowered your standards, you have compromised your integrity, it's going to lead to regrets. You know it. You can feel it right here before you even make the compromise. It goes, ouch, ew, and you can feel it. Okay, so it's going against you, and then you start sweating, and you know it's going against you. When you feel that, stop. Don't let somebody pressure you into doing something that's going to compromise your integrity. Take your time to sleep on it. Breathe. Let it out and be true to yourself. The sooner you're true to yourself, the sooner yourself will come back. The sooner you'll have this relationship with your guides again. All right?
I've seen a lot in couples who let's make it real world here, where they stay together in the relationship for the children. That's a compromise on both sides.
You mean when they don't love each other anymore?
Right. We're staying together for the children. Well, that's not only not good for them. It's horrible for the children, because the children can see all this, and that gives them the wrong idea of what a relationship
these are just
should be.
Okay, so what these are, going back to My Guided Journey, Part 2, page 12, compromise. This is when you're preteens. We're kind of moving out of that, and I want to keep you into the preteen part. All right, going back to where you're going to write about what happened back there, as you chronologically fill out the pages and write into the pages 1 through 11 up to 12, and look back at what you did, so you can see where the compromise really got a hold of you. Page 12 is when it gets depressing. Okay, it gets really bad. By the time you get to the preteen part of your life, just before you become a teenager and start you start doing some radical things, okay, depending on what got you to that point. This is not about judgment. This is about what happened. This is about the truth. This is between you and yourself. Because this is how you're going to bring yourself back. But you got to tell it like it happened. If we can't, we've got to go back to where it started, because unless you discover where this all started, you can't really live the life you intended. You can't get off that snowball effect of all those decisions you made that you really weren't qualified to make. You were forced to make them. You were so young you didn't have enough information, but you did it anyway because society pushed it on you, you know? And just to reflect on where things are right now, you're not kids now, but where the kids are right now, as opposed to what happened with you when you were a kid. The pressure on these kids is way bigger, okay? Because now there's all this pressure to, you got to go to college, and if you don't get all these GPAs before you even get to college, like while you're in grade school, the pressure on these kids is so ridiculous, all right? Then they go to college and they get their degrees and they can't get a job. I mean, what? And actually, by the time they're done with college, it's obsolete what they learned anyway. So it's really, the pressure on these kids is completely ridiculous, and it's way more than it was on you. So you guys, you get this worked out, you bring it back, you would do the work, you write in there what happened, so that in November, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be done with page 1 through 18, because we do these every Thursday on Facebook Live. We'll be through the 18th page, and we want to hear about what you guys wrote in your journal, in your journey part 2. And let me just finish my thought on that, Ray. Mm-hmm. And we're going to go over what you guys have written down as we move through it, and we're gonna together we're going to see what you couldn't see. We're going to help you work through where you got stuck there and get you unstuck from that early time that only you can realize and transform your life from. All right? That's how it's done.
I think a lot of the people who are using the journal now, when they go back to their preteens, teenage years, are going to find out that they started compromising then because of their parents splitting up or something like that, getting a divorce.
You mean by watching the compromises that their family made?
Or they had to make compromises. Now they couldn't do this and couldn't do that because.
Well, okay, don't get compromise confused with life. All right? I had a lot of life thrown at me. I had a lot of life thrown at me. And I didn't compromise. I couldn't, you see. It's not that I wouldn't. Okay, it's that I couldn't. I was in one piece. I couldn't. My urge, my soul, my drive, it wouldn't let me. I was true to myself. My true self wouldn't let me cheat. It wouldn't let me do that to myself. All right? So don't get compromised, confused with living. Because guess what? We came in here and we all have our own little, lessons and in life to live. And it doesn't always feel good. But that's not a compromise. That's our life, okay? And we're not supposed to run from that. So don't get the two confused.
We see a lot, more than not, we see a lot of people, through your coaching business who were in their 50s and 60s who compromised back early on.
Right.
Especially with their careers. They loved to paint, they loved to play music, they loved to do whatever, but they compromised. Rather than following their path, they made a living. They chose to make a living.
They chose to make money.
Right, instead of following their true path.
Okay.
That was a huge compromise.
Okay. It may or may not have been. I just have to say, don't get compromise confused with life, because let's say you were a musician and you were really good at what you did, but you couldn't get a gig, you couldn't get a job, you didn't get discovered, whatever, all right? But yet you were awesome, really good musician or singer or whatever. And you decided one day, that's just going to beat me up. I know I want to have a family. I want to be with somebody who I know has my best interest at heart, a loved one. I want to have a life. And if I just go down the path of being a musician, my calling, then I am going to have to give that up, because I'm going to be on the road all the time. I'm going to be struggling. I'm going to be whatever, okay, to make it happen. It doesn't seem to be falling in my lap. It's my heart's desire, but it's not landing in my lap. It's not lifting me up. I'm having to scrape by and dig myself through everything just to have it, at the expense of not having the life I wanted. All right. So that is a choice. Now, was that tragic? No, that wasn't tragic. I think if you had which one holds the biggest regret?
Yeah, sometimes you'll never know.
You have to weigh that.
Yeah, instead of just running from your true path, what you really, really wanted to do, you could have found maybe a way to incorporate, say, music into whatever you did. You could have become maybe a music teacher. You could have become a person who worked for a musical instrument company in some fashion, as an engineer or a salesperson or whatever. Or those same people we find now in your coaching business, their kids are gone. They're empty nesters. They may be single again. A lot of them are single, and they're going back to those teenage years.
Well, they're going back to
what drove them.
Right. They can go back now, and they can do the things that they couldn't actually afford to do before, because they couldn't seem to find a way, their path, in a way to make money and make it make sense. So yeah, then they can go back and they can, play in a band, or, do whatever they wanted to do with music, whatever it happened to be,
They realize they made compromises to get where they are now, and they want to go back and study those. That's what the journal will do.
It will unearth that.
Right.
It brings back your hidden knowledge about, just by the fact that you tell what really happened back there and identify what it is. So that as we move you through it, page 1 through 18, once we're done with these, and we're ready to start working with you guys on your own journals and what you wrote in there and how we dig through that, that's where you're going to really find out what was important for you Okay? What's important for you is different than what's important for somebody else. It just is. Nobody's path is the same. Everybody's got a different blueprint.
So kind of wrapping this up, if you learned how to compromise early on, because society and parental pressures and societal pressures kind of forced you into it, and it became a pattern in your life.
Something you became really good at.
You became comfortable with it because there was this void inside of you. You weren't good enough, you weren't pretty enough, you weren't this, you weren't that, and you thought about all these external things that, well, once I have this, I'll be good enough, or once I have this, I'll be pretty enough, I'll be smart enough, I need a new car, I need to do, those are all the external things that even make it more difficult for you to keep compromising, because those don't work.
Well, here's what happens. When you get a little older and you compromised something, all right, and you find that you've had all these things, and yet you still feel this gnawing, this void, this emptiness, you go, okay, wait a minute, wait a second. I have had all these things now. I've done all this stuff, and I still feel this? Okay. That's why this is important. We bring this, you write it in, and we look at it, and we find out why this is still here, this void, this gnawing, this missing piece, okay? What that is that's you that's missing, all right? You're not totally here yet. That's what's missing. At that point, you look at it and you go, well, my music, what I want to do in music, that's really, I thought that's what it was. My head, my reasoning thought that's what it was. I know something's missing, and I feel a sadness in me because I figured it had to be this, because that's all you have been. You've been only in this world. But when you bring this back, you find out what this really is. You'll find out this is not why.
What's interesting is this pressure to compromise got really powerful as you got through your high school years and into college and things like that. And a lot of the people now who are in their 50s or maybe 60s, what do? They go back to school. They go back to college to continue or pick up where they left off.
But Ray, until they bring themselves back, until they do the work, until they actually are one whole person, they're still just coming from here.
Mm-hmm.
They're still not here. You see?
Got it.
Until you're back and you interface that with this and start working together and you're in one piece, you will never really know. That's why this is important. You see, you guys, what happened is, how do I know this? Guided. I wrote the book about it. I know how this works. I didn't have to suffer with this, but I've helped so many thousands of people who have, and I know in these sessions, I know where they got lost. I can sense it, okay? So you're going to learn to do that. You're going to be able to do that, but you got to bring yourself back first, because you're missing. You're walking through life dragging a leg. You're missing half of you. Until you bring that back, are you going to have your answers? Okay?
So we'll be here next Thursday.
Okay, next Thursday is going to be page 13, and it's going to be about the fear returns. Part 2, page 1, was about fear. All right, when you're a little baby, you're like a toddler, and then you've lived enough life so that by, now you're a teenager, and the fear returns. So wherever you got knocked off your path in your past, in your young life, it begins to show up again, except now it's more amplified. All right?
Tell the folks in our audience where they can get this fabulous journal.
Okay, first of all, this is guided. It's available on Amazon, and it's available in audiobook format, Kindle, and paperback. All right? you probably want to read Guided first to see how I did it and then how you do it, right? This book will change your life, Guided, and this book will restore your life, the journal, the companion journal to Guided. My Guided Journey is available on my website at lindadeir.com. It's right on the homepage to the right. You'll see it. Free download. It's available for free.
Free?
Yeah.
Whose idea was that?
And the reason it was offered for free is because so many readers of Guided have wanted to learn how to do this, how to get their life back, how to make this connection to their spirit guides and angels, how to better their intuition, how to know when guidance comes through the instant it happens, how to trust it, how to act on it. That's why I wrote this. So you are going to be able to do that, but you've got to do the work in part 2 first, okay? And that's why we're here to help you guys do it and walk through it. So next week, same place, same time, page 13, The Fear Returns.
If they have any questions, please contact us through your author page.
Yeah,
or
just go ahead and
go to the website, and your email address is there.
Yeah. Or you can just leave a
comment.
message on the stream right here.
Yep.
Okay, so I have written a series of videos in support of the readers of my Guided Journey, the companion journal to my flagship book, Guided. Each week on Facebook Live, I talk about your journey back to the beginning, when you first made contact with your spirit guides and angels. They haven't gone anywhere even when you ignored them or didn't realize they were there. In these Thursday Facebook Live videos with me, you learn how to journal your own hidden knowledge, documenting your life journey, revealing who you are and why you are here. When you follow this, you not only get your life back, but you will never doubt yourself again. See you next week.